Hello. Hello, Dan.
Hey, Harsh.
Hey, can you hear me good? Because I'm using a different microphone.
What the fuck? Oh, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay, great.
Sounds wrong.
Great. I'm using a different microphone. Let me know if it gets too loud. I'll just change my location.
Okay. I can hear background. I can hear a lot in the background.
Okay, let me try to switch my headphones. One. Yeah.
माइक नहीं है
Mic on.
ब्लूटूथ पे चलेगा
Huh?
ब्लूटूथ पे चलेगा
Bluetooth?
वॉल्यूम पता नहीं है देख हाँ देख अब ये फॉलो होता है फास्ट खुद को फॉलो करें
And it goes quiet.
How about now?
Oh, you sound muffled. You sounded better before.
Oh. Things.
It's all right. We can work with it.
Okay, that's fine. Let's start.
Right. Okay. Let's get started. So, I use an app quite heavily, and it's called BB Edit. You're on a Mac, aren't you?
No, I'm supposed to Windows again. I've been using a lot of Black Hat tools lately, and most of them don't seem to run on Mac.
Well, you need a text editor
Okay.
that has file browsing capability, because that makes things fast, and it needs to operate with regex as well. You need to know regex, but the regex has already been written. It's just about copying and pasting it and finding out the best places for it. Right.
I'm sorry, I've been using Sublime, and I'm learning regex from regex, the online regex tool that we have.
Sublime.
Sublime Text 3.
Okay, so we'll look at that. It looks good. Yeah, so you can scan entire folders, right?
I'm not sure, but
it looks that way. It does look that way. Pretty cool image. It's available for Mac as well, so I might download it and just.
Yeah, it's pretty good tool to look for text files and code and everything.
Yeah. Okay, so I've been using. This thing looks a bit like this. Oh, let me share my screen with you. That one. Something that looks like this, but if I go to just show my windows. Got one open. No. Right. BB Edit. File. New. Disk browser. So just download the files at the same time. Downloading. So I've got a disk browser in here, right? So I can open up like a folder, and be able to see all the files inside it. So just expand that. That's awesome. If I could just go and find that folder, there we go. So this is InStyle Mobile's liquid files, right, for the whole theme. So got access to everything. So if I go in here and go to the theme liquid, it pops it up there. So we've got all the theme liquid there. So you have to ignore everything I've said in the past, which is the right way to do things, because in the past, everything I've said is about getting optimized to load quickly and about getting GTM like first in line with the scripting and stuff like that. So we've got more control over what happens inside of there. In terms of the tracking, I was always under the impression that the tracking had to start happening quickly, because otherwise we'd be missing events and things like that, which is not the case, because all the tracking goes off the files that it can read inside of the browser's window object. So all of that gets recorded anyway. So we don't have to have any tracking launch before the page is finished loading. And the more we can put things beyond the page load event, the faster we can make the site. That's basically principle number one, is delay anything that doesn't need to be loaded in the critical rendering path. So there's a lot of manual optimization that goes into this. So you're familiar with the theme.liquid as it looks like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've created a structure that I do every time now, and it looks more like this instead. So this is InStyle's one, I think. It may be a different one. I'm just making sure that it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's InStyle's one. So what I've done is I've have like an order. So I've got preload assets, meter tags and similar. And then we go on to CSS, and the idea is that we get all of the CSS into this bit that we have for all of the pages. Then we have the critical rendering path JavaScript. So Google Tag Manager, lazy sizes, and then as little as possible after that. So we've got here, I'm not sure why Trackify X and Trackify are installed, but to prevent any arguments with Thomas, I've left them in place for now. But I disagree that they should be here. I really disagree with that. I know that there is skepticism between you, Thomas, and Bilal about exactly how Trackify should be loaded. I'm of the firm opinion that it should be loaded on the onload event, because what Trackify does is the script that runs asynchronous is the one that's in here. So where is it? Is it in sections or snippets? I think it's in snippets. So the script that runs asynchronous is this, right? That runs async. It will load the hook.js asynchronous because this script is telling it to load async, which is fine. But what this script does is it calls other scripts in. So every time it does that, those scripts do not load asynchronous. And when it starts launching Facebook pixels, particularly if there's 3, Facebook starts putting events left, right, center in the page load, and it can have quite a damaging effect on the page speed. Because there's no control over Facebook's script, over the way that Facebook launches the tracking. So it's important that this hook.js here doesn't load until after the page load event. But I've left it in for now anyway.
What would be the ideal solution for this, to get this file from events inside GTM?
The problem with it is the amount of variables it relies on from the server. But we'll touch on that shortly, because there is a way around that as well. So any events, any server variables, any Shopify objects like line item.product ID, we can take that and create a data layer push and just write that into the theme.liquid, so that it pushes all the data into the data layer, and then GTM can pull it and recreate the scripts from there, and then we can load it when we want. So that's a great workaround, yeah, for sure. So I've got down here, I've got a single line of Google tag parameters, which is that long. Equal page type, etc., etc. So so that we can make the we can make the information available to GTM and then create the ifs and whats inside of GTM based on the page that's loading. That'll be that's a much faster way of running tracking
If we
scripts.
have just moved it away from the head tag and made it.
There's no point in having the data layer push in the head because it's not required there. All this information is required on the server. It just has to execute before the closing body tag. So put data layer pushes down at the bottom because we'll wait for the page to load and then take action on all of the tracking. And then it makes it a lot easier. So first thing is moving things out of the way like that. The CSS, I've generated some rules, which is if it's under say 5 or 6 kilobytes for a CSS file, then we'll just write the CSS straight into the head and have all of the CSS there. So it's not. Should we go over a few principles? This is fun. So principle number 1 is the time it takes to go from starting the page load to the page load event. We want to have as few HTTP requests as possible. So we want to every HTTP request, and it goes in a way where you're contacting another server through the DNS, and then you're waiting for the handshake of the returns information. That's every single time, and we get something like install mobile. Let's just get an incognito window up. I always go in incognito. I've got too many plugins or Chrome extensions that weigh the page load down. So incognito, open up DevTools. Where is it? Oh, incognito window, done that. DevTools. Go to the network tab. So the network tab only deals with how long it takes to download things, which is great. And I'm just going to go to install mobile, and then we see. I always do the home page initially because the home page uses the theme.liquid, and then the home page usually keeps everything a little bit bare. So, what we got here is for me it loaded in 2.15 seconds. My internet is lightning fast, and usually the average inside of GA is about 3 times higher than mine.
Yeah.
So I like to see my page loads being around about 1 second is what I like to see them as. Hook.js always loads slow for me. It takes a while. That is holding up further down. Actually, no, that's loading a sync. But then things that are holding up the page load line is right on the edge. So I've reduced the viewable window to just inside of the page load event so we can see how many HTTP requests are. So if I open it all up, you see all the other ones that come in as well after the page load event. And then when I bring this down like that, so we're just inside of the page load event. That was probably close enough. That's probably close enough. Got 100 HTTP requests, which is quite low for a Shopify site, but we want to reduce these wherever possible. So we can get rid of the custom style CSS because this is only a small file, so we can just hard code this into the header. There's no page dependency on that. So
or
we can
maybe merge it with the previous CSS because style.css is already part of the scheme, and just combine these two together.
We can do that. Yeah. We can put the custom style at the end of the CSS file. I'm not too keen on the styles.scss.css files either, because they come through like they're written like this, right? When it passes in the browser, it's written like this, which is great. But when you go and have a look at the file, it's not written like this. It's a dynamic CSS file with all kind of variables in there. And my belief is that Shopify does a bad job of parsing that every single time. Hiya. There's some on the side there. On the side. The big car. Oh, they're both in the door in the little car. I don't know how they both ended up there. Really, I think I did it. Sorry, buddy. Right. So yeah. So I like to.
I read about SESS. It's a kind of a code for Shopify that automatically compresses the space between.
Yeah. I don't. I see that, but I think it reads faster when we copy this file and create our own new CSS file. So the SCSS file is 48 kilobytes in size. No, sorry, it's 31 kilobytes in size. But if I copy the CSS that's actually parsed, my mouse is doing something weird. I can't quite see it. Where's my mouse gone? Where's the pointer? That's weird. If I copy that and create a text file and save it, it'll come in at around about 3 kilobytes or 8 kilobytes or something like that. So it reduces the file size massively, but it's taking out all the dynamic parts of it. So it could be worth looking into a bit later. I kind of saved that for a bit later on. We've got a few apps that are loading that don't need to be there. Common.js is another red retarget one. Got these images that are loading. So the one big thing in the images is these little ones here. Each have a HTTP request. So we can do a CSS sprite to make that one HTTP request. Not sure what to do about Lux because they have changed the way that they load their stuff. You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so there's loads we can do to make the HTTP request like bare minimal and make it load even faster. All of these images are they on the homepage? I didn't see them on the homepage. I was on there again. Oh yeah, they're being loaded by Lux, aren't they? So if we can delay Lux, then we're on to saving a ton of HTTP requests. All that kind of stuff. So yeah. So the first step, what I've been doing, Hash, is having like selling this as a 4-week program. Instead of trying to do as much as we can in the first week, just doing a set task list every week, and then slowly bringing their page load time because they're paying a bit of money for it. It helps them see the value as it continues over a 4-week period. Considering I'm considering putting in a fast track version where they can pay double and have it all done within 3 days, that kind of thing. So I've changed the theme.liquid around quite a lot. So I've got here, we're preloading jQuery because it takes a while to load. And then I've added the CSS file here. It's 38 kilobytes, so I might put that as a preload thing as well. The custom CSS has been hard written, custom fonts, and then they got the no script style here for wherever it is that I pulled that from. And basically, the task number 1 is to reorganize the theme.liquid so that it's optimizing the delivery to the browser.
Okay.
In this way.
So this is a standard for theme.liquid file, but for different theme files, for like different themes, the theme liquid file is different. Like for example, the new optimized theme and the other themes that are more attractive towards impulse purchasing, those are different in terms of when it comes to their theme liquid file, and they have a lot of like they cut down the usage of apps and inbuilt all those features like flying pop-ups and kind of short notifications and pop-ups and the different encounters kind of stuff right on their feed, and they don't need to rely on any external apps. So reducing theme file into this structure needs to be done very carefully for the theme file that we are not familiar with.
Hash, I can't hear you very well, so I'm going to make up what I think your question is. Is the question with different themes, how they have different theme files that are laid out completely differently, that we should treat them any differently?
Yes. No. I mean to say they have different. I mean to say they have different functionality built into their theme, like counters and flying pop-ups, and sometimes even different CTS buttons and all those small actionable events in their theme.
Yeah.
And if you follow your same structure for every theme file, you might be hurting any of their feature sets, and which can hurt our customer and make them come back to us with the question like, what happens?
No, there's no reason on any website in the world why we'd want to do things any differently. Any platform, any website, any theme, any plugins, nothing. So this is how the browser works, right? This is the I did not know all of this months ago, right? And have you seen that curve for CROs, the stupidity curve or whatever it's called? CRO curve, optimization. Let me see if it pops up under those. I see lots of diagrams I'm familiar with, but not the right one. That one's similar, not quite the one I want. Bear with me, I'm going to show you something really when I see one that kind of looks right.
Yeah, sure.
This one might be good enough. Let me just find it again. Let's have a look at this one. Okay, so this one's kind of going into it, right? So the first thing is, no, I don't like that one. This one might. That's not very clear, is it? Let me add in stupidity. This looks like it. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Right, okay. So we start off and we know nothing. And the first thing is that we're confident that we can do what we're going to set out to do. The first thing we do is get some amazing results. We get up there, and then we realise that what we've done has had no effect whatsoever. So we hit the peak of stupidity, and then everything comes crashing down. So this is kind of like they go, "Oh God, you know what? I'm an absolute natural at this thing. I'm a master of it," and then all of a sudden something happens and it fucks everything up. So you fall down to the very bottom, usually in a lower position to where you started, valley of despair. And then yet you hunt around for the right answers, and then you have the slope of enlightenment, and you have that slow curve going up to the plateau of sustainability, which is often not as high as the peak of stupidity. And this is like know nothing, wisdom, guru towards that end. Confidence level slowly then increases, and I went through that exactly with because I was thinking like, you know, micro optimizations to the CSS, image optimizations, follow all the rules in that way. But then I stumbled. I was so confident that I could spend half a day on any Shopify website and bring the page load time down by half that I started selling that to a lot of people, and I got 3 in a row. I couldn't move the needle at all. And I offered a guarantee on all of my work, which is don't pay me unless it works. One thing that motivates me more than anything else is having to give money back if I do a poor job. So I was very motivated to find all the answers. And this took me around about 8 weeks solid. If you speak to my wife, she didn't see me for 8 weeks whilst I was doing this. 8 weeks solid to uncover every little bone there is and everything to do with page speed optimization. I truly think I'm the best person in the world to do this, and I'm not a developer. But we can only get better, right? So the secret is the browser. Who'd have thought? The server does not matter. Doesn't matter how things are loaded in the server. What matters is how the browser gets the information and passes it to the screen. That's all that matters. So when we're talking about the browser, Google Chrome doesn't treat any website any differently. It just wants the information in the right way. And what we were seeing on InStyle's thing just then, where is it? Is it this one? Yeah, what we're seeing on this here, whether this is the same one we're just looking at, I don't think it is, but it's definitely InStyle Mobile's one anyway. What we're seeing here is not optimal delivery to the browser. This is so far beyond optimal that we need to change a few things around. So you get the document first. That happens without fail every time because nothing can happen until the document's been delivered. Then we have 2 CSS files, then we have some scripts, then we have some images, then we have some scripts, then we have some fonts, then we have some scripts, then we have some image files, then we have a font, then we have an image, then we have some scripts, then we have an image, then we have some scripts, and then we have an image, then we have more document type files, then we have more CSS. And then and what's happening down here, a lot of these images are now tracking, right? So you got Google Leads, which is the AdWords tag, the G tag from AdWords. Then we have like these pixels going off, which look like images, but really they're pixels. 238 bytes, 414 milliseconds. I mean, how can 238 bytes take half a second, right? And then we've got these files. So this one here, this dialog is likely to be the preview bar or something like that, or it says here express buttons actually. Then we got more CSS, and then we've got more images, more scripts, more images, more scripts, font, images, and this is all delaying the page load. And we've got down here 2.17 seconds, and there's still shitloads of optimizations we can be having here. Now, what's important is what happens before this red line. What happens after that red line, I'm not at all concerned with. The users might hate it if we if they can load the page like in half a second, but then it carries on downloading content for 3 minutes and uses up 20 megabytes of their data plan whilst they're out and about mobile. That'll piss people off if their data runs out too quickly. But you know, we can combat that later. So the way the browser works is the browser connects with server. So the first thing is there's a connection, right? And then the next thing is the document. Now that comes with a load of problems that InStyle does not have. Usually Shopify sites, particularly if they're code heavy, really struggle to do that quickly. So we can optimize that behind the scenes in the server by cutting out anything that doesn't need to be executed before the page load. Then the browser wants the CSS delivery, and then two events happen, right? One you know about, and one I'm pretty sure you probably don't know about. So if I just put some arrows on this will make it all a bit more user-friendly. Event 1 and Event 2, both of these have to happen before the rendering process starts. So one is DOM ready. The other one is CSSOM ready, which doesn't appear anywhere, but this is a term that we use quite a lot. And in order to get to DOM ready or CSSOM ready, we may need to run some JavaScript. So we may need to also have, like, let's just call this critical rendering JS. So the critical rendering JS gets executed as soon as it becomes available to the browser, because the browser doesn't know what is contained inside of any of the files, so it tends to run it straight away. And what the browser does when it gets a JavaScript is it stops everything to look at the JavaScript. If it says it's async, it'll throw it into the back end and run it and download the file without halting anything. If it doesn't say async, it will download, pause everything, download, and then it will execute the JavaScript immediately. If it goes to async, it'll let it run in the background, the download, whilst it carries on loading CSS and loading images and stuff like that. And then as soon as it's downloaded, what async means is it'll execute the script as soon as there's a spare socket for it. Now, if that happens after the page load event, it's not causing any harm. If it happens before the page load event, when it comes to run that script, it will stop everything and run the script. So async is a loading feature, not a script execution feature. Huge difference between what the common conception of async means and what async actually is. And async is one of the biggest page speed killers there is. If you defer a script, what it does is it downloads a script in the background and it waits till the end of the loading process in which to run the script, but that can still block the rendering, right? Because of the thing, right? Now let's just say, so when it's CSM ready, DOM ready, what happens then is it goes to render. So you get page, render, and then, so it needs both of these. It needs the HTML and it needs the CSS passed into the HTML tree in order to render the page. and the images. It doesn't actually need to download all the images. It just needs to know what the sizes of all the images are, and it creates the rendering print. And then we have a thing here. Let's just say it's a decision one. When 100%, we get yes, onload event. Simple, right? So to get to there, that's all that we need to be concerned with, is to remove anything that doesn't really fit into that. So anything that is like tracking does not fit into that. Anything that is scripts that add functions to things but doesn't change the way they appear. Now, I'm working on a site the other day where it runs a JavaScript to tell it how to process the variant selection and how to put it into the cart. Without that script running, the add to cart button is essentially broken. Well, they can't use that until the page is loaded anyway, because until it reaches a stage of interactiveness. So that was to load that script later on in the loading process. Now, what slows pages down? There's only a couple of things that slow pages down, right? In fact, I've narrowed this down to two things, all right? Biggest killer is additional CSS that it wasn't expecting. When CSS gets injected into the page load after CSS on ready happens, do you know what happens to the page load? It stops. It reprocesses the CSS OM and it starts the page render again, pretty much from scratch. The other thing that affects the page load render is JavaScript. So loading things unnecessarily into the page load. These kill the page load time, right? They make it much bigger, these two things. Now, the bigger thing that's harder to spot is where JS comes along and goes, oh, yeah, so we want to add this function, that blank div that you have there, we want to swap the inner HTML to this tree, so we're changing the tree, and we want it styled in this way. So when that happens before the page is reached rendering, it halts the rendering and it will delay the page load time. If that happens before DOM ready, whilst it's trying to calculate the CSS OM, it'll start the CSS OM process again. If it happens after the DOM ready event, it will slow the whole thing down even more because it has to calculate the whole lot. So in the performance tab inside the Chrome, what we see a lot of is layout calculation, rendering calculations, and you see them all the time. And one of the biggest things I've seen wrong with one website that had tremendous page load times was they had a countdown timer. A countdown timer written in JavaScript that amended the CSS slightly every time it changed the number, and was changing it every 20 milliseconds. So every 20 milliseconds, it was having to re-render the next part of the page as it's trying to load, and they had 12-second page load times. We commented out the timer, and suddenly the page load times were 6. And it was like half the page speed time just because of a stupid timer that didn't need to be there before the page had finished loading. So we unloaded the timer, and that fixed a huge array of problems. So this is pretty much everything there is to know about page speed. It's not what you're expecting.
Yeah. So additional CSS and these JavaScript, they are like part of the page, but they should be like loaded when they are very much needed, right? Like, but there are some sort of CSSs that are inline, that are on the page and loaded at very
yeah. So when inline CSS is built into the HTML code, so it gets that whilst it's loading the HTML tree. So that's not too much of a problem. The inline CSS. The CSS that's loaded further down the page, that is inside of style tags, that is a problem. Definitely a problem if it can't see it when it's loading the head. One of the optimizations is to go looking for anything inside of style tags and then pulling it into the head before the JavaScript.
Pulling into your master CSS. Actually, it would be ideal to have one CSS that's available for the entire document. Entire set of files that you have.
Yeah, Yeah, but then we're increasing the size of that file. So if there's a lot of CSS, and we can load and it's going to load on every page load, it's quicker to have it all loaded in the theme.file, theme.liquid, because it has to load the file. It has to load that text anyway. But then we might be delaying the document load, so we have to be careful about exactly what we're loading in. I work on the basis that one HTTP request that is like 80 kilobytes more is worth it to save on HTTP requests if that saves 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 HTTP requests for lots of little CSS files. So I like to kind of copy it directly into the theme.liquid. That's better than adding 80 kilobytes onto the main CSS file, because then that takes a while to load and it can't do anything until that's loaded. So you get the document might be slightly smaller, but then you're loading a CSS file on top of that. Here, it's quite good because it's loading the CSS at the same time as loading the document, because it knows to load it, etc. So that's not too bad whilst it's still doing that. But if this CSS file was, this is almost as big as the document anyway. It's definitely worth having a smaller CSS file than a slightly larger document, because those extra kilobytes figured out. So often I don't know the exact reasons behind why that's the case, but I'm happy that it is the case, and I kind of move on to the next problem, that kind of thing. So I've found that compiling everything into one file has not necessarily worked, but inlining script tags in the head seems to work really well when they're small ones, especially when we want to start going, okay, this CSS lot here, this block of code here isn't very big, and it only needs to apply to product pages. So so it's easy in the theme.liquid just to put if the page template equals product, then also run this line of code, and doing it that way as well. Let me find another one that I've done recently. This is one I was doing the other day. I'm just going to load it up when I've found it. Layout.
So then I have one more question.
Yeah.
What happened to your idea of liquid minification? Like, I remember the last call that I had with you. You said a concept where you said there are too many liquid requests and liquid conditions that are checked on every page render and.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. This is part of it. Yeah, this is part of it. Okay. So here I've got theme.liquid I was working on the other day, and the idea is to reduce HTTP requests, right? So here we've got the same layouts. We've got meta tags, we've got CSS, and then we've got the CSS, the first CSS that gets loaded. I'm not changing the order of any CSS, right? So this is the first thing that his site was loading first, which was the jQuery Cider, whatever it is, CSS. That's been loaded straight in. Then we have the styles.css, the style tag, the new styles, which is a custom one, I think. Then we're loading Font Awesome, then this, that, and the other. But when we start getting further down, I've started saying things like, if template contains returns English or template contains returns French, then we load this style sheet here. So that's just a style sheet for the returns page. So that we're splitting out the CSS by page and doing it that way. Template contains product, or if template contains cart, there's that one. Template contains cart, template contains product, etc. So we're splitting out the CSS. So all of that there, all of this here is CSS. All of that is CSS in this thing. So
a lot of CSS.
Well, there is, yeah, but most of it is running straight from here. Most of it is not coming from HTTP files where it needs to go and look up the file. So that's one form of liquid optimization. So we're reducing the amount of lookups that it needs to go and do. So we've got the styles.css, we've got the returns.css is the only two HTTP requests it needs to make in order to do that. So that's one thing. So the way,
and one more question then.
yeah,
What about localizing all the external CSS that are coming? Like for example, I read this that external requests cost more time than the local request. Like for example, the same CSS that was externally hosted, if delivered from within the file, uh, leaves a good impact on the load speed.
yeah. Yeah. So have we got any external CSS? Let's have a look at all these CSS files.
Just
Bootstrap min. This one's coming from the Lux directly, right?
On the top
That
of the
one.
screen, just press XHR, where it's all matters.
So with external, what one server I always look out for straight away is the Amazon AWS. Anything being loaded from Amazon tends to be slow, and you can tell if you get the PageSpeed plugin into the browser and just go and visit it. Often it'll take like 250 milliseconds just to load the content onto the page, which is just a text file. It's a good indication as to how long it takes the server to go and grab that information. So yeah, I'm always copying and pasting scripts and CSSs either directly into the theme.liquid or into their own file to be run as a script tag for inside the liquid files. I'm always doing that. That's definitely one thing that we should be doing for sure. So I'm just going to show you something on here. So one thing is how do we ensure that all CSS that's going to load into the browser is going to come from the head? And with this program, with their BBEdit, I'm sure you can with Sublime, but I'm going to test that out in a bit as well. I'm going to go to here. So what I'm looking to do is search the whole set of files. So I've got here. This has got selected the browser, which is install mobile theme files. I'm going to type some regex in. So I'm looking for anything that kind of fits this pattern. Oops. Do you know regex at all? You've been learning a bit of regex, did you say?
Yeah, I've been trying, but I'm not just at a very advanced level of it. I'm just a beginner.
So what I'm looking for here is something that like an opening style tag. I've left the closing bracket off that because sometimes it's style, type, text, that kind of thing. So I want to find all of them. And then what this is saying is anything can happen after that. And it can even go onto new lines. So I don't mind. It can be any character and it can be any new line. And then I'm going to say, put the wildcard, as many of them as you can find. I'm putting a question mark in, which is saying, but don't be looking for the end style. I don't want everything that goes between the first instance of this and the last instance of that, because this might happen 3 or 4 times. I want you to stop looking the moment you spot this pattern following. So it will stop at every closing style tag with that question mark in there. So that's making it less aggressive, if you like. Now I'm going to find all instances of that inside of the theme files, and normally we get quite a few. So here we are. This is showing. Can you see that all right? Do you want me to make it bigger? It's small for me. Hey, can you see that all right? Or do you want me to make it bigger?
Yeah, that's fine for me then.
Okay, cool. So we got here theme, backup, cart hook, liquid checkout. I don't think that file's important. That's a backup of the theme. I don't think. Are you using cart hook?
Yeah, we are using cart hook.
Okay, so we might need to optimize that as well. It looks like the theme file pretty much exactly. So we'll go ahead and optimize the theme file separately and then copy it into there. Theme backup hash liquid. That's probably not important. Theme.liquid isn't too important because that's what we're optimizing. So I'm looking for all of those. This one here, that happens here in the optimized code. So there's the style tag there. It's found that. We've got this one here. This one's not in the head. So this needs to be moved to the head, right? because that is happening after the closing head and before the body. So that's the wrong place for that. The way the browser loads CSS is that it looks forward at all the CSS and generates one document. So a further optimization further down the line is to write one block of CSS for every page that we're cancelling out previous selectors of the same with different rules to make it reading faster and less parsing required. But that doesn't really slow the page too much because the browsers are really quick at doing that because that's an internal calculation. But yeah, so this needs to be moved into the head, so we can do that. Then we've got then as we look further down, theme.liquid.liquid. Same thing again. Why is that a separate file? I don't know. Contact template liquid style sitting at the bottom. So this style needs to be moved into the head and made available to if template contains contact in front of it, and then we move it to the head in the theme.liquid. Then next one, divider.liquid. So we've got a style there. Is the style even important? Not sure. It doesn't look like it might be important at all. But this template file, this divider.liquid, literally creates a div, and then it creates a style. So this is every time that's included, that's gonna upset the render everywhere that's included. Every time there's one of these dividers put into the file. So that CSS needs adding to the head, and then either comment it out or remove it from this file to leave just a bit of HTML. And then featured text. There's some style at media screen only, but that needs moving to the head. The header.liquid. There's a big block of style there. That needs moving to the head. Something like the header.liquid. This CSS is going to load on every single page load, right? So that just needs adding to the styles .css or the custom CSS, or just into the below the other files that have already appeared. Image text doc liquid. There's more style. All of these styles are slowing the page load time when they're loaded because they're not happening in the head. These are all happening in the body, in the template space, right? So all of these need changing. Map.liquid, newsletter.liquid, page banner template, page details template, page FAQ template, page gallery template, password template. All of these need moving into the head, all of them. And so that's the optimization. That's why we end up with on some files we get like a shed load of HTML. A shed load of a shed load of CSS in the head. But the thing is, this much text here isn't that much text when it's trying to load it. This text loads really quickly. I mean, some of these lines are quite long. I make all the style one lines and allow them to continue onto the side quite a long way, because it makes it easier for us to read as we're scanning down the file later on, carrying on with our optimization. So I tend to do that. I have a limit of around about 6 kilobytes per style, but it's like this bit of style here. It's like a couple of bytes, isn't it? Then we've got another one. It says another one further down, but I can't quite see that. Oh yeah, so below here we've got video style, video displaying on, and it's like, okay, that kind of null and voids the whole thing. So why is that so far down? Because that's going to completely change the rendering later on. So that's a big problem. Cart shipping calculator. There's style that's already been commented out. That's okay. Cart hook. When it comes in a JS file, I tend to ignore those for now. I kind of try and assess what it's doing. I'm kind of thinking, well, ignore that for now, kind of thing. This one, product form.liquid, style at the bottom. If it's style at the bottom, often it's not that important. So go remove and add it to the head, and let the browser decide what style rules it needs. That kind of thing. So that's the big optimization round of the first one. So we're going through all of the liquid files and pulling out any style that's in them and adding them to the head. And you want to see how much of a difference on page load time it makes.
Yeah, I also want to try this. Like, I see a lot of scattered CSS all on my templates. Just want to get them into one place. That's a good start. What else? In the file that you have showed me, the previous one, not this one, the one you optimized, you have
Yeah.
included some of the apps on the header as well. Might I ask, like for example, here meta tags, you include SEO meta managers and SEO meta tags. These are coming from separate sections or separate snippets.
Yeah, just to keep it so that we can read it easily ourselves. Keep the section separate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Why not include them in one?
Say again.
I said, why not include them in one? Like they are just meta. And what if we just fire them in one section and call that? That was my same question. Like liquid minification would require us to call less includes, like these ones, like merge these to include.
Yeah, absolutely. You're on the money, because this is the way that I take this. The way that I translate what's going on is that in the head where you've got include tags, it's got to go and look at a file. So I think in effect that what it's doing here is saying include SEO Meta Manager. It then has to call a HTTP request to go and look for that information and then pull that in. It's going to the same server, so that should be pretty fast, but it will still need to route through the DNSs and all the rest of it. So there is that side of it. But also, the downside is these may get updated by the app owner. So let's just say with Trackify, for example, we pull all of the code in from Trackify, and what I've done here, just in this site, which is not Install Mobile, is I've pulled the script in from Trackify directly into the head. I've minified it slightly just so that it reads like one line at a time rather than taking up half the page as it's laid out for better reading. So I haven't minified it by putting it in a minifier or anything like that. This is just putting everything into one line times over. So that's what we've done there. So that's just putting it in there. So it saves on that HTTP lookup. It's not going and looking for the file to get this code to bring it into the document, because it's already written there. So we're just going to execute those scripts. I've put this on defer, so that it will load towards the end of the page rather than early on. But I'm just working on a GTM version of this, so this can run this script with a data layer push in GTM. But I'm a bit worried about Thomas knowing too much about that just at the moment, because they're still working on how to do this. I'm giving them a lot of advice on how to load it and stuff like that. But Thomas has got some really valid objections, which is they unload their script, but the page load of the site that's just been installed takes forever anyway. They've got really slow page load times, and this is loading way too late. And then what people are seeing is their Facebook pixels loading late and drawing conclusions that their pixels aren't loading properly and will not want to continue using the app. That is a huge issue for all sides when that's the case. So what I'd also want to do is, when I'm working on a really slow site and I want to get the best out of the page speed, is I can explain to the customer that this can be loaded afterwards. It's not going to harm the data collection on the thing, and I'm there to explain that to that person, which is why I'm working on a version 2 kind of thing at the same time for my own optimization. But that's that. Hopefully we can find the best solution. Maybe a JavaScript or something that can say unload this script unless it takes longer than 2.5 seconds, then run the script. Something like that, maybe. That would be quite a cool enhancement or something like that. So yeah, the what I see a lot of is particularly bad with bold commerce apps is that you get an include file, usually further down the page, and it will say something like include. You don't have them on this site, so they don't have them on this site either. But sometimes you get taken to there's an app that's been installed, and then it says include and often the bold commas one starts with BC. So include BC, whatever it is. And what you get, when you go and visit that file to see what it is, you've got like, 30 kilobytes of code that's written like this. If this, then that, and then if not that, then this, and if not that, then that, then if not that, then this. And that tends to increase it tends to increase the time it takes the document to load. So one of the first things I look for is if this file, which obviously comes out like that because there's no styling applied to it yet. If this file takes longer than 1 second, and this is taking a total of 829 milliseconds on this run.
That's a lot of time.
I have seen it quicker. That is a long time, so there is going to be some optimization we can do there. I want to go looking at all of those include files. So what we've just covered is phase one, which is pulling all CSS out of all the files and into the head one way or another, and optimizing that way. That's going to reduce the page load time by, if not a little bit, by a lot. So the second thing we want to do is take the theme.liquid and then go searching for yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we go searching for, sometimes there's no space. So I put a space in and follow it with a question mark to make the space optional, and then include dot star question mark, oops, question mark, and then stop at the next percentage sign. So then we go into that, but I only want to search the theme.liquid initially with that. So find that in this file, and then what I like to do is click the extract button, and then it gives us a list of them all. And then what we want to do is visit all of those pages and see if there's any of those pages that look like they are like rammed full of code that we don't need.
Yeah, what if they are like repetition of includes, like for example cart hook, we see cart hook repeating itself.
Yeah, so cart hook there appears twice, which on the face sounds like it's going to load wherever it is twice. But then you have a look at the theme.liquid and go and find that. It's right down at the bottom, and we've got this code here, which is capture the snippet content, include cart hook checkout, and then end capture unless the snippet contains liquid error, and then include cart hook checkout. So it's giving it an if or condition, so it's not actually loading that twice. So that's kind of okay. Sometimes it will take longer than it's worth it to try and find out the reason why they've done something. It doesn't seem too bad, so I'll leave that where it is. And then when we optimize it the first time, we track it for a few days and see what the page load times are like, and then we can come back to it and say, okay, now I'm starting to see that cart hook is a bigger problem. So then we want to go looking into that in a future optimization kind of thing. So we do 4 rounds of optimizations. The first thing is to get the CSS out of the way. The second one goes hand in hand with that one. We don't really need to track for very long in order to be able to do that, and that is to understand what's behind all of those liquid files. So let's pick one of these, which I'm sure will have another set of includes. So pop-up quick shop, right? Okay, so let's go and have a look at that file. So that is a section. We should see it here. Pop. Why can't I see it there? Is it a snippet?
It should be a snippet, yeah.
Pop-up quick shop. There we go. So in here, I can go and find all of those instances in there as well. So there aren't any includes in here. I would have thought there would be. But we can have a scan down. This is all just HTML, which is great, apart from the settings one. So if settings are, there's if statements and end ifs and all of that, I don't really care about. I think they're all fine. But often they're just like, if this, then that. Sometimes you see like whole pages written like that with virtually no HTML in there at all. Absolutely ridiculous. And just test removing that file. Test if they're actually still in the app. I love finding apps that are running code that they no longer have installed, because easy optimizations just remove and carry on, that kind of thing. So yeah, so that's all good. And that's the optimization of the liquid files. I also want to look into like this is a big thing is you go to the theme.liquid and look for the include files, and then you go to the include files and look for include files, and there's another layer of include files in some of them, and you might go to some of the templates are like a single line of code. Don't use this file, use this other file instead. Why not put that other file in this file and reduce the page depth by 1? So, and then you go to another one, and it's got like a long list of conditions. If this, then use this file. If that, then use that file. If then you go to that file, and it says, okay, now you're on this file. If it's this, then use this file. If it's that, then that file. All of this can be blended into one file. I think by being a bit smarter with the if or statements. I think that a lot of the app developers, they're developing apps and they're just adding code to everything, and then go, oh, well, what we could do is we could have another include file, because that's what the liquid system tells us we should be doing. So it's okay to include millions of files, but the more files that go into it and the deeper the page depth of those files, the longer it takes to deliver the document. And I've seen this at 7 seconds. And you go looking, and you find a huge torrent of files that are just unnecessary. So you remove the first include from the theme.liquid, try and load the page, and find that it loads 3 seconds quicker because we've removed the first include that goes on to the rest of the chain. So
yeah, it's a good
we
point.
test it without it, see what breaks. If nothing breaks, try keeping it out. If something breaks, then we need to go to the next level and test what needs to be in there and run through that way.
That's a lot of good information.
yeah. That's how we reduce page load times. Tarek's like, we need to build an app that does this. How can we build an app that does this? Just like, you can't. You need human eyes on everything, because you need to make a decision as to whether we're reading through this like a machine and we're finding where it's going wrong.
Yeah. Okay. So
often I do this optimization where I pull all of the styling out and I load it all into the head, and then I do the same with the page depth thing, and then I load it into the shop, and the theme's just broken. And then I get the comparisons out and I read through everything. What could possibly break it? And then I put the old head back in, load it again. Oh, it's fixed now, so there's something wrong with the head, and I just can't see it. So then I'm swapping out the CSS with the scripting, and then I find where the fault is and just narrow it down, and then find what's breaking the site. And it's like you break a site 1 million times before it's fixed. When I say that to the client, I say, "Oh, I don't need to break my site." No, we break it in preview mode only. That's why we have so I always immediately create a duplicate of their theme file and label it page speed version 0.1 unstable, do not publish.
Not publish. So then,
why is there an unstable file on here? So because we're running tests on it. that's how we need to work, and that's how it's going to happen. So and then we have a stable version, and we ask them to load it.
Yeah. So if I include all the CSS in the head, does that become part of the document? Like currently right now, the 800 milliseconds document, for instance.
Yeah. Well, how does the document get loaded? So the liquid system is just a file system for storing all of the bits of information. So the idea with the liquid system is you create snippets for things that are going to get reused over and over and over again. So one snippet might not be in every page, or one snippet might appear several times in a page. And that's about saving the coding. So there's less code to be loaded, which is great for the server if used correctly. But often a snippet is created just for one thing that's going to load on every single page. There's no point. So what the server does is it goes looking through all the snippets, and it's building a document file from that. So you've got the head code that goes in, gets really easily, they pass all of the variables into the head, and then they go header area. So they go and look at the header template, they pull the code out the header template and stick it in the top part of the body. If the header then includes, it goes and looks at those and it sticks them in the header, then copies that and puts it in the document. So what the server needs to do with the liquid system is compile it all into one document. So if something's going to load on every single page, we might as well just make it part of the theme.liquid instead of having it go and find the snippets. So having snippets and templates only where snippets and templates are required. So we get up here. We're on the wrong page, bear with me. If we get back to the theme.liquid, so this happens on every single liquid file. Is we go into the body, and very quickly we start seeing templates appear. So we've got the no script GTM section header. So that's the next thing we want to look for is sections, right? So section header calls the header file, which is this one here, header liquid. Header ID, promo banner, blah, 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 load of conditions. If we copy everything that's here, bar the schemas, I'm not quite sure what to do about schemas. But if we were to copy everything in here and just add it directly into the theme.liquid, it will still work.
But what will be the impact? Like, I know the section, calling a section works well, and copying the same code into the theme file. Have you tested this at comparison between calling a section or calling a direct code into theme file?
I've tested it a lot more on the footer because that's not part of the above the fold content. So, do you remember Linda Stars?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She actually paid me to do this. Wow, that was one of my own personal achievements. So, lindastars.com was loading in like 12 seconds. Now I'm getting 1.83s. On average, he's seeing around about 4.5 seconds on average now. So his conversion rates have gone up quite a lot. He's hell-bent on having a lot of imagery on here. We've recently just turned off the quick shop because the quick shop was loading all of the images that goes into there as well, it was loading everything. So what we've got here is the footer area. Everything from here down is hard-coded. It's not calling on a theme.liquid. The theme.liquid is not calling on the footer file. The footer file is not then using variables, and it's not using any kind of liquid way of loading. So this is entirely hard loaded. This lightened the server load by quite a bit. Also, we have down here the payment icons. You can't click and drag them because they are very small background images to separate divs inside a thing. So it's a CSS sprite. So if we like inspect just that bit and we try and understand what's going on there, what we've got here is you got the bulleted ways, which is pre-styled, so that's fine. Pay icons, pay Apple Pay, div, right? Div. And in the CSS, we're saying load a file. So if I go and, I can do that from there. If I go to the network tab and reload this page, this is what we're seeing, right? So this has been optimized by me quite heavily already. And if I just go down to, if I reduce this to the page load event, just like super fast. You can see how few HTTP requests are being made to get here. So we're down to 113 out of, it was about 358. So we've got all these images loading. Only one of these images is the payment icons now. So let me see if I can see it. Payment icons, right? So this is one PNG with all of them included. And then I'm just using CSS to move this image into position behind the div as a background image. It loads. It only has one HTTP request, and then it uses CSS to display it, which is really quick. So all of these images are all separate. They're all like, when you hover over it, it changes the image. So I'm looking at new ways to have that load incrementally row by row in like an AMP style way. There's only three CSS calls, and all of these are like just over. That one's just over the limit size for that. These two are well over the limit size, but there was, I think, around about 16 CSS files being loaded because of the different plugins he's using and stuff like that. So we're optimizing the shit out of it. Also, I'm not sure where I'm up to with this. I need to have a look at it in a bit. But also, like say, CSS. This is loading a much cleaner version of the CSS file at the same time. Or if it's not already, it will be later on. But the load times of these are super quick. 11 milliseconds to load all three. That's absolutely fine. All the things with it, as it fills up, you see how there's a gap here. This is the time it's taking to render the CSS OM. This is taking the document, the HTML tree, and then it's taking the CSS, and then it's taking from here to here to make sense of that CSS before it can start loading the images and scripts that are in there. And then as it's loading the images, it needs to render, it's rendering these two, and there's a gap. Now we start seeing gaps in the faster page load time. This means that our loading is happening much quicker than the rendering, which is ideal from a loading perspective. Then we can start work on the rendering process, because the loading is often what slows the page load time down, not the rendering. The rendering is the sheer volume of images that it's taking to process. And as you scroll down, you see that the image times are increasing because it's got them all kind of queued, ready to go. And even though they're not physically downloading, it's waiting to be able to load them so that it can then pass them. But then you see, like this one being the longest one here, 325 milliseconds. It's a slightly larger file size than some of the others. But also this one looks to be coming from a different place, because this is coming from cloudfront.net. Why that one image is coming from there, I have no idea.
That's an external request.
So yeah, so now that needs to be added as an asset and then load it from the assets. But then we have because we're using Cloudflare at the same time, it's then kind of unloading the scripts that it can delay the scripts till whenever it needs to. So it's then loading everything later on. So Cloudflare is a really good tool to be using alongside of Shopify CDNs as well.
So do you have any
start optimizing for Cloudflare? As well.
Yeah. Do you have any settings for Cloudflare?
Yeah, loads. Yeah, you have to be careful with Cloudflare because often it'll break the site. Because
I've tried Cloudflare and it really hurts the product form section of the product. Like for example, people can't press add to cart. They add to cart simply stop working. Especially like unification from within the Cloudflare.
Well, the issue with Cloudflare is it's looking for static content to load. It's looking for static content to keep. The reason why all these images are not coming from Cloudflare is because they're coming from it's coming from variable code. Because there's no code that says this is the image that we're loading. There are Shopify variables in there saying load the image that relates to product ID when you're loading this product ID. So it doesn't know which images to serve until it's received the document. So that's why these are not coming through from Cloudflare. He's not changing the homepage, so we could make the entire page a static document, the homepage in a totally static document, and then that'll load like so quick coming from Cloudflare. But that's something I want to explore further down the line. I think it's a bit excessive right this minute when there's lower hanging fruit. But the footer itself is hard coded. There's nothing here. There's no file relating to the footer. It's just I've literally just got the footer. I'll come to here and I inspect the footer, find the div that is all of the footer. So index sections, footer, div class footer, and just go copy out of HTML, paste, then remove the link to the footer file. So what I think I've got that on a footer file. The file is footer hard code, like include section footer hard code, not include section footer.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Anything that's static on the website can be hard coded.
Say again, sorry.
Anything that's static on the website can be hard coded.
Yeah. Also, anything that is dynamic on the website can be written in hard code as well. It's the dynamic code is where it's using objects to say this is the file that you go and locate in this circumstance. So there's no way of the code being definite. So in all of these, it's got a string of products that it wants to include. Cloudflare can't cache these image files because what if we change the products? What if the products change? What if search happens and these products change? But in terms of the homepage, these products are the products that are on the page, and they don't change. So we could hard code the entire page and still not lose any functionality whatsoever. I'm not sure what's happened here. I keep getting this A in a funny symbol. I need to look into that, but still. Yeah, so this is, in theory, the header and the header image can always be hard-coded. The footer can always be hard-coded because then the template goes in the middle, right? So when the thing got liquid, you can hard-code, you can hard write the header, have a if mobile device screen size is over this, load this version of the code. If screen size is below this, then load this version of the code, and make it entirely hard-coded with no dynamic. We can even remove the responsive design of the CSS to make it even easier as well, if we wanted to. Save a couple of the 100% or 95% or whatever. But yeah, it's really possible to get Shopify loading in under 2 seconds every single time, no matter what device or network speed, by reducing HTTP requests and reducing the amount of dynamic content, liquid files it needs to look up and things like that. So I went in on that graph I was showing you before, the stupidity thing. I went in optimizing all the problems I could see, but I've since mapped every problem back to either a JavaScript or CSS. So let's just optimize the shit out of CSS and JavaScript. And it automatically fixes all the other problems at the same time. When we do that, we make Cloudflare much easier to use. So if you have Cloudflare in there, add Cloudflare at a later date, it won't break the site because we've stopped the CSS from loading halfway down the page. We're not doing anything unexpected that Cloudflare didn't see or something like that. So we get some easy optimization out of the way, and then we run Cloudflare.
That's great. So the script optimization, the JavaScript, is it going to be the same way, like searching the entire document, entire file with that same regex for scripts, and then seeing that where these scripts are needed? If they are not,
this is my weakness right now, okay? Because I don't know JavaScript well enough. So what we can do is search the entire file for exactly what we were looking for before. So we can go script, and then with the same regex, we can then go and find every script that's in the whole file system. And what is ideal? Find all. What is ideal is that we find an easy way of assessing whether a script is required for the page load or not. So this is a really good way. The ones that I do know really well are things like data layer pushes. There's the ones without any variables in them. I can quickly assess whether they are required or not. But then we can go and find all of the scripts running, and either unload them or fire them from GTM. I'm in favor of firing them from GTM, so we can go remove them out of the way, out of the code completely, and then just have them fire in GTM later.
Unless they have Shopify liquid variable, because that doesn't work from within GTM.
Well, say with variables that are in Shopify, like this one here, gift card .qr _ identifier, the server knows what that means, so we can create a data layer push with that and just load them all as dynamic variables into GTM. Run one data layer push at the bottom of the script on every page. We load GTM up with every variable coming from Shopify. and then we alter the code. So we can do things like Klaviyo's product script. We can run Klaviyo from GTM, but then that product script has to happen after that. So I've got a GTM, I've got a data layer push that includes all the variables that Klaviyo needs to run for that, for the script to run. And then we run that script after Klaviyo is initialized. So we can pull Klaviyo straight out of the load sequence and then load it very shortly afterwards, because that does not need to be part of the critical render path. People that use it get really touchy about me touching the Klaviyo scripts, but you know, well, no, it needs to come afterwards. Otherwise, you're harming my chances of making your site faster. And it'll work quicker as well, because here's what I'm finding: a page that takes 12 seconds to load, it takes 12 seconds to load everything, right? And then everything's useful. If we can pull everything out of the way that doesn't need to be there, and then it loads in 2 seconds, and then we load the tracking, and then we load Klaviyo, and then we load anything else that's interactive after that, like say like Wheelio or something like that, then the page loads in 2 seconds, and then there's no rendering going on at the same time that the browser is executing scripts. So it's the browser isn't stopping and starting; it's just going through everything in the right order. So all we're doing is making the browser's work really light and easy. Honestly, Hash, that's all there is to it, really.
Yeah, but that kind of includes a lot of human intelligence into the process. Like we acquire clients and we want to know what their scripts, what their CSS, and what their includes are doing, and then yeah. I'm sorry, Dan.
No, go ahead.
What are you smoking, Dan? Vape?
A vape.
I figured. Okay. This looks interesting, Dan. Have you done this kind of optimization for ISM, or I would like to do this myself for ISM? Like follow the steps that we have showed in this video, and just simply replicate that for ISM and show that to you that you can decide whether I've followed the pattern or not.
Ask me that again.
I said, have you done file optimization for ISM, or like I want to do it myself for ISM and then show it to you, then present it to you, and you can tell me that what part exactly did I wrong?
In all in Shopify?
For ISM files, yes, for my own store.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The entire liquid, the entire CSS, the entire JavaScript for
yeah,
ISM and present it to you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. There's no problem. Yeah. So this will work on any shop. This will work on any website at all. I haven't touched any Magento sites because I hate Magento, but I have a friend who's got a Magento site, and I've given him just a few tips on that, and he's managed to halve his own page load time just by going in and making those few changes in the way that things are loading. So it works in any site. WordPress, I find that it's least effective because WordPress is quite well written, and the plugins are loaded from the same directories and stuff like that. So there's less interference. But with Shopify, I find that swapping the servers is the biggest effect. So I get paid quite a lot of money for recommending that they change the server. Follow my affiliate link and then go and load it from there. There you go. Thank you. I can do that for you if you want. Thank you. You paid me enough. So that kind of thing. But yeah, it's definitely universal. And what we're doing is that the apps themselves, it's not the app developer's fault. They've got to make an app that is compatible with every theme out there. But you know, when having like a snippet in the header file of a theme.liquid, there's a few apps that are doing this really, really well, and they are finding ways of making their plugin really compatible without affecting page speed. One of those is Wheelio. Another one of them is often it can be Lux as well, although I don't see it in every case. But they're doing things like having a snippet in the head of the theme, and then you look at their code and they're onloading everything. Criteo do this. I never touch the Criteo scripts because they're drawing a lot of variables out of the server, but they also don't, their code does not execute until after the onload event. So all of their tracking happens after the page is loaded. So that's really good. So I've started learning which apps not to touch and which ones require, some customization. One that I see quite frequently is an app called Stamped, and that's like an alternative for Lux. Stamped runs entirely off external scripts, so it's really easy to pinch the script out of the theme.liquid and just stick it in GTM and run the script from there. And then it just unloads the script. So just pull it out of the way and load it from there. And the page, if you're quick enough when you scroll down, the page loads, unload, then the stamp section loads. I've got a really good example to show you actually. It loads 0.76 seconds. Big learning curve. One that I couldn't 7 seconds for a couple of weeks whilst I was learning this stuff, and I had to really knuckle down and get some deep learning in on how the browser works because it was taking forever to load. So he's got a load of images that kind of have to load and stuff like that. So that's all really cool. If we go into one of the products, I'm not sure if we get that. Oh, we get the stamped reviews down here. So if I refresh and leave on the page there, it loads initially just without it. But I mean, the page load was 0.58 seconds then, so it's really hard to see. Let me get into a product. Load down. Right, so if I just load from that moment. So the stamp comes in later. It kind of loads afterwards. This loading in 2.4 seconds is really difficult to see because it's loading so quickly. But the stamped is loaded from GTM, and so in a sense, I know what to do. Let's do this instead. Let's slow the speed. Let's just go to a 3G connection instead. Go top of the page, refresh. So it starts loading the page. Further down the page is just blank, and as it's loading all the elements in, you can see that it's loading stuff in slowly at the top. This looks a lot better on mobile. And then at the bottom, you'll see the footer come in first. See that? And then it loads a stamped in afterwards. So the footer gets loaded in after the top as well. So I've layered in the way that the page loads. So doing a mobile load, doing a desktop load on a mobile speed, it's taking 16.4 seconds. These are never accurate because doing it that way. Because when you go on a mobile phone, it's still lightning fast. But say iPhone, an iPhone load on a fast 4G, fast 3G network, it's looking like this. So this is all that's on the page at the moment. Then it's loading down. Taking forever. So it gets that top bit loaded first, and then all this follows in at the bottom. But the stamp bit's not there yet because it's still loading it. And then the stamp bit appears afterwards. So it's layering things in as it goes. So we're focusing on the above the fold straight away, and then it's loading below the fold afterwards. So something like stamped reviews, which usually appears a bit further down, looks exactly the same, usually inside a tab or it's a bit further down. Anything that's hidden by tabs, we want to afterload, even if it's appearing on the thing. So like view size chart, this appears afterwards. Product details, that appears before that other one appears. These images load later. These images are loaded by a script that I haven't found yet. So with that is I hide the actual images so it can map the layout and load the layout, and then it loads the images afterwards in like a lazy load format. So images one by one, and then Well, that's kind of getting on to like week 3, week 4 optimizations. that kind of thing. So
Okay, this entire thing looks really interesting. Dan, I want to get started right now on ISM. Oh,
yeah, we load at full speed, and it just takes like next to no time to load. It's 2.9 seconds. It should be faster than that actually, but still, there's a lot that goes into these pages, kind of. Where's stamped gone? There it is. So it loads afterwards. But yeah. And if stamped is missing by the time they get down to that part of the page, yeah, who gives a shit, right?
yeah. It's not part of the interactive page. That's great.
It doesn't stop the page being the page. So
yeah. Okay, Dan. I have another meeting in 2 minutes actually.
yeah, that's okay. That's right. That's cool. So we've sown the seeds. So I'm gonna leave that with you for a day or so to have a good ponder over, and you can come back to me with any questions.
Yeah, I'll just follow whatever you said on this call on ISM, and probably by tomorrow evening I'll just have it for you on my preview. And if you can give me a short call on that moment, and we can go together what I've done.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Well, how soon can we get clients on this agency model now? Like Tariq really wants to start.
Say again, sorry. I have one bottleneck at the moment, and that is me being able to do all of the jobs. So as soon as we've got you doing one, we'll start sending them your way.
Oh, that's perfect. Awesome. So
if we can put my input down to about 20% and your input up to about 80%, and we'll do it exactly how I've been doing it for a week or two, then we can then I can start getting loads more clients in. Because if I start talking about this on Facebook, every time I put a post on Facebook, I get a lead out of Facebook. So I've stopped posting on Facebook because I also get a lot of referrals, which is really cool stuff. So I want to be doing kind of like 5 or 6 a week is target number one. I'm currently able to do 5 or 6 a month. So if we can get that number for sure. If we can get down to about 5 or 6 a week, that'd be awesome. I imagine that you can do a lot of the work, and then when you're really clear on it, that you can start delegating bits. But also, I want to get into script optimization. I want to know when scripts are excessive, and whether there's a big JavaScript that can be simplified with a simple jQuery, or whether a jQuery actually isn't required and we can get away without loading jQuery. Those kind of questions need answers, don't they? Because sometimes you see jQuery being loaded 8 times just because the app.js says, "Oh, load jQuery 3.1.7." After the only jQuery that's required through the whole file is jQuery 1.11.2 or something, which is loaded initially, and then it loads again further down, and then again further down. So we want to be catching those things out, and working on the script side as well. I think that we can get every site we work with below 2 seconds. If we can do that, we'll very quickly get a very big name for ourselves, and we won't have to struggle to get clients at all ever.
We'll do it.
So yeah, all good.
Okay. Awesome. This is a very nice start, Ken. Really excited.
Yeah. Speak to you tomorrow.
Okay.
Take it easy, buddy.
All right. Thanks, man.
Ta-da.
Oh, talk soon. Bye-bye.